We lost another great one. Gustavo Badell, the Freakin Rican. Dave Palumbo here with an RX Muscle News Update. More sad news from the bodybuilding world. We lost another great one. Gustavo Badell, the Freakin Rican. One of the best bodybuilders of the early 2000s. His claim to fame, beating Ronnie Coleman in the challenge round. A round they used to hold at the Mr. Olympia competition where they would compare various poses and get judged by former Mr. Olympias like Lee Haney and Dorian Yates, Samir Bannout. Gustavo defeated Ronnie in that challenge round, and that was during Ronnie's reign where he was supremely dominant, winning Olympias. But in the challenge round, if you pick the right poses to go against different competitors, you could strategically win that round. And so did Gustavo, and I think that was the last time they held it after that. But Gustavo's motto was, "I work hard." I interviewed him innumerable times back in the day, and he used to always tell me that. I said, "How do you do it, Gustavo? How did you win the Ironman? How did you place third at the 2005 Olympia behind, Jay Cutler and Ronnie Coleman? How'd you do it?" He's like, "I work hard." That was it. That was his answer. And you know what? Gustavo proved to all the naysayers that hard work pays off. And I think that work ethic, that he got probably from growing up in Venezuela and then living in Puerto Rico, being a hard working guy, not having anything handed on a silver platter to him, he proved, to the world that he was great. I remember I had to interview Gustavo. I was working for Muscular Development at the time. This was probably in 06 or 07. And he was under contract with the magazine, and I had to interview him for something. I think we were doing in the trenches training videos, and I had to do his voiceover video with him. And he was very mad. He felt that he was slighted and he was insulted because I don't know if Steve Blackman didn't put him on a cover he was promised. I don't remember what the insult was over, but he felt disrespected, and he wouldn't do the interview. And I said, "Gustavo, I got to do this interview with you. We have to put this up." "I will not do it." He goes, "You have Steve Blackman call me." And I had to tell Steve, "You got to call this guy up. He feels like he's been insulted, and I think that you got to, he's very proud, of himself and the hard work he does, and he feels that it needs to be acknowledged, and if it's not, he doesn't want to do this and that." And that was Gustavo. Steve called him up, smoothed it over. We wound up doing the interview. It was a great interview. And, he loved to be interviewed. He loved to talk about, his process and how he got from point A to point B. But he would not compromise his principles for anyone. That was Gustavo. You love him or hate him. That's who he was. And I believe that's how he lived his life. He loved his wife. I know he loved his kids. Chris Aceto was working with him when he was trying to do a comeback, and I know they spent some time together. I think Chris said overseas in Italy or something like that. And he said, there wasn't a guy who loved his family more than Gustavo. And I'm sure they're mourning right now the loss of a great man and a great father. And I send my condolences, my love, my healing energy and prayers out to his family. This has got to be a really tough one. From what I hear, I'm hearing stroke as cause of death. I don't like to give cause of deaths without autopsy reports or definitive confirmations from doctors, but that's what I'm hearing from people who are close to him. It's not confirmed, but I did hear stroke. Now, I know Gustavo battled with some kidney issues over the last several years, but I don't think that was life-threatening in any capacity. I think that this, whatever caused his death, was something that was not expected. And so, once again, we've just lost too many people lately, and Gustavo was a great one. I wish Gustavo would have been participating more in the sport since he left. And I'm not talking about, I know he was still training people and doing something like that, but he really wasn't available or around to do interviews. And I'm kind of sad that I never got a chance to really do an in-depth interview with him and talk to him about his times while he was competing. Chris Aceto actually remembers the show he went to with Jay up in New England. I think it was the New England Championships, where Gustavo was actually in the show, the amateur show, before he had gotten his pro card, and he won the heavyweight class. And Chris saw him, and he's like, this guy's got potential, and you could just tell he had a lot of muscle. Once he learned to peak his body and bring it in shape, there was no stopping this guy. I mean, third place at the Mr. Olympia competition is very impressive, especially during the years that Ronnie and Jay reigned supreme. I mean, he beat Victor Martinez. He beat some really great guys on that stage. There was also a time, Chris told me, that I guess Jay was winning was on the Grand Prix tour after the Olympia. I don't know if it was at 2000, 2001. And they were traveling through Europe. And usually Wayne D'Amelio, who was running the organization at the time, would, fly these guys around, to all the various shows. But there would be guys who wanted to go on the tour but weren't part of the elite guys. And those guys would take the train. Gustavo, he said, they'd fly an hour from one city to the next, and then Gustavo would spend 12 hours on a train getting to the same place because it was expensive. And that's the kind of dedication Gustavo had to the sport, the love and passion he had for the sport. He didn't care. He just wanted to be there and be in it. And once he learned how to bring his body in, like I said, watch out. This guy was super dangerous on any stage at any time. Lee Priest told me in 2005 when he lost to Gustavo at the Ironman, Lee said I should have won, but I was at that show. It was a really great show. Lee looked fantastic. Gustavo looked fantastic. I think Gustavo was a little leaner than Lee at that show, and probably that pushed him over the edge, but it was a very close battle. And Gustavo had so much energy on stage. It was great to watch this guy pose during his routine. The mandatories, he would scream and yell while he was posing. People would go crazy in the crowd for it. It was really a special time in bodybuilding when he was competing, and he always made the shows super entertaining. So, Gustavo, if you're up there watching now, I'm going to miss you, man. You left us too soon. Huge, huge prayers and condolences out to Gustavo Badell's family. I'm Dave Palumbo with an RX Muscle News Update.